The lobby of the Meridian smelled like polished stone and fresh lilies. Sunlight poured through the 30-foot glass walls, catching on the brass fixtures and the sharp lines of the marble floor. Everything about the space said the same thing. You were either supposed to be here, or you weren't. Chloe Bennett stood behind the curved reception desk, in a tailored navy blazer, her posture perfect, her smile practiced. At 28, she had mastered the art of deciding who belonged in under 3 seconds. The building's residents paid for that kind of efficiency. When the man walked in, her eyes moved over him once, and made their decision. He wore heavy work boots that left faint marks on the marble. Faded navy jacket stretched across his shoulders, the kind that had seen real use. A metal toolbox hung from one hand. His skin was deep brown, his hair cut close. He looked like he had come straight from a job site. Chloe's smile stayed in place, but it cooled by several degrees. The man approached the desk without hesitation. His voice was low and even. I need to speak with the building manager. It's important. Chloe glanced at the digital schedule on her screen. You have an appointment? No, he said. He'll want to see me. She gave a small, polite laugh. That wasn't really a laugh. I'm afraid Mr. Langford doesn't see people without appointments, especially not during business hours. If you'd like to leave your name and a contact number, I can have someone get back to you. The man didn't move. He simply looked at her. There was no anger in his face, only a quiet patience that made her uncomfortable, for reasons she couldn't name. My name is Marcus Hale, he said, and I need to see him today. Chloe had heard that name before, but only in passing. Something about new lease paperwork, or an ownership group. It didn't connect to the man standing in front of her in work boots. She decided it was a coincidence. I'm sorry, Mr. Hale, she said, using his name like a dismissal. Without an appointment, I can't let you up. Building policy. Marcus nodded once, as if he had expected exactly this answer. He set the toolbox gently on the floor beside his boot. I understand policy, he said. This can't wait. Behind her, the security desk was empty for the moment. Chloe felt a small flicker of irritation. She hated when people made her job difficult. She reached for the phone. I'll have to ask you to wait in the lobby, or come back another time, she said, already dialing the assistant manager's extension. Marcus didn't argue. He simply stood there, hands at his sides, watching her with that same steady gaze. It unsettled her more than if he had raised his voice. While the line rang, Chloe studied him again without meaning to. There was something about the way he held himself. Not arrogant, not defeated, just present. Like a man who had learned a long time ago that fighting loud rarely changed anything. The assistant manager picked up. Chloe kept her voice low but crisp. There's a man down here claiming he needs to see Mr. Hare Langford. No appointment. Work boots. I've already told him. She stopped mid-sentence. Marcus had reached into his jacket and pulled out a single folded piece of paper. He placed it on the marble counter between them. It was a work order, the kind any plumber might carry. At the bottom, in small, precise letters, was a name and a signature she didn't recognize. Chloe's eyes flicked to it, then back to his face. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, she said, more firmly this time, or I'll need to call security. Marcus picked up the paper again and returned it to his pocket. He didn't look angry. If anything, he looked tired, not from work, but from something older. I've been patient, he said quietly, but I'm not leaving until I speak with someone who can actually make a decision. Chloe's finger hovered over the security button under the desk. That was when the elevator at the far end of the lobby chimed. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped out, one of the senior property managers, someone Chloe had only seen from a distance. He was already scanning the lobby when his eyes landed on Marcus. His expression changed instantly. Mr. Hale? The man said, surprise clear in his voice. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. Marcus gave a small nod. Plans changed. The property manager crossed the lobby in quick strides. He shot Chloe a sharp look that made her stomach tighten. Why is Mr. Hale standing in the lobby? He asked her directly. Chloe opened her mouth, then closed it. The words she had prepared suddenly felt thin. He didn't have an appointment, she managed. The property manager stared at her for a second longer than necessary. Then he turned back to Marcus, his tone shifting completely. Mr. Hale, I'm so sorry for the wait. If you'll come with me, we can go straight up. Mr. Langford is already in the conference room. Marcus picked up his toolbox without comment. As he followed the property manager toward the elevator, He glanced back once at Chloe. There was no triumph in his expression, only something quiet and unreadable. The elevator doors opened. Marcus stepped inside. Just before the doors closed, Chloe heard the property manager say something in a low, urgent voice. "Oh, I had no idea who you were." Doors shut. Chloe stood behind the marble desk, her hands suddenly cold against the cool stone. The lobby looked exactly the same as it had 5 minutes earlier. Bright, expensive, controlled. Something in the air had shifted. She looked down at the spot on the counter where Marcus had placed the folded paper. A faint smudge from his thumb remained on the marble. For the first time that day, Chloe Bennett felt the distinct, uncomfortable sensation that she had made a mistake she didn't yet understand. And somewhere above her, on the 42nd floor, Marcus Hale was already walking into a room full of people who had been waiting for him all morning. The elevator rose in silence. Marcus Hale stood with his toolbox resting against his leg, watching the floor numbers climb. Beside him, the property manager kept glancing sideways, as if trying to reconcile the man in the work boots with the name that had been circulating in emails for the past 2 weeks. When the doors opened on the 42nd floor, the air felt different, cooler, quieter. The kind of quiet that only came with real money. A long conference room waited at the end of the hallway. Inside, 6 people sat around a polished table, leather portfolios, expensive watches, kind of people who measured time in billable hours and property values. Conversation stopped the moment Marcus stepped through the door. One of the men at the head of the table, Richard Langford, building manager, stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. "Mr. Hale," he said, voice tight with controlled panic. We were told you'd be coming tomorrow." Dressed for the inspection, Marcus set the toolbox down beside the door. He didn't smile. "I changed my mind," he said. "Wanted to see how things actually run when nobody's expecting me." A woman near the middle of the table, someone from legal, looked between Marcus and Langford, clearly trying to understand why a man in scuffed boots was being treated like the most important person in the room. Langford swallowed. "Of course. Please, have a seat. We can go over the lease transfer documents right now." Marcus didn't sit. He walked slowly to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out over the city. From up here, the streets below looked clean, orderly, nothing like the version he had walked through an hour earlier. "I didn't come here to review documents today," he said, still facing the glass. "I came because one of your staff downstairs refused to let me up. Said I didn't have an appointment. Told me to wait in the lobby like I was delivering a package." The room went still. Langford's face lost color. "Who was it?" "Her name was Chloe," Marcus said. "Young woman at the front desk. Navy blazer. Very professional." No one spoke for several seconds. Marcus finally turned around. His eyes moved across the faces at the table, calm and unreadable. "I've owned pieces of buildings before," he continued. "This is the first time I've taken the master lease on an entire property. I wanted to understand what I was stepping into, so I came in the way most people who actually work in this building come in. And I learned something very quickly." He let the silence stretch. "Most of the people who keep this place running would never make it past that front desk if they weren't wearing the right uniform." Langford cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale, I can assure you that our staff is trained to—" "I'm not interested in assurances," Marcus said, cutting him off without raising his voice. "I'm interested in what actually happens when no one important is watching." He picked up his toolbox again. "I'm going back downstairs. I want to speak with her, alone. And then I want to walk the building. Every floor, every service entrance, every loading dock. The way it actually operates. Not the version you show investors." Langford nodded quickly. "Of course. Whatever you need." Marcus paused at the door. "One more thing," he said. "Don't fire her." Few people at the table exchanged glances. Marcus looked directly at Langford. "I want her to understand why what she did was wrong. Firing her won't teach her that. It'll just make her more careful about who she judges next time she needs a job." He left the room without waiting for a response. Downstairs, Chloe was still standing at the reception desk. She had tried to go back to work. She had answered 2 calls, greeted a resident, even smiled at a delivery person. Her hands wouldn't stop feeling cold. When the elevator chimed again, and Marcus stepped out, this time without the property manager, her stomach dropped. He walked straight to the desk. No anger in his steps, just the same quiet steadiness from before. Chloe straightened. "Mr. Hale," she said, voice tighter than she wanted. I didn't know. I know you didn't, Marcus replied. That's the problem. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, the polished words she usually relied on wouldn't come. Marcus rested his hands on the marble counter, same spot where he had placed the folded work order earlier. I've been turned away from buildings before, he said. Offices, restaurants, even apartment lobbies when I was younger. Always for the same reason. Boots, jacket, color of my skin. People decide what I'm worth before I open my mouth. Chloe felt heat rise in her face. She wanted to explain, to say it was just policy, that she was only following orders. The words felt small and pathetic in her throat. Marcus continued, voice low enough that only she could hear. I bought the lease on this building 3 weeks ago, not because I needed another property, because I wanted to see if places like this could be run differently, with a little more attention to who actually keeps them standing. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. You're good at your job, he said. I can tell. Being good at keeping the wrong people out doesn't make you good at protecting the building, just makes you good at protecting an image. Chloe's eyes stung. She blinked hard, refusing to let anything show. Marcus picked up his toolbox. I told them not to fire you, he said. Things are going to change around here, starting with how people get treated at that desk. You can be part of that change, or you can find somewhere else that still rewards the old way of doing things. She turned to leave. Chloe found her voice at the last second. Mr. Hale, she said. He stopped. She swallowed. I'm sorry. Marcus nodded once. It wasn't warm. It wasn't cold either. It was simply acknowledgement. Most people don't get second chances after they show who they really are under pressure, he said. Don't waste yours. He walked out through the glass doors into the afternoon light. Chloe watched him go until he disappeared down the street. Then she looked at her own reflection in the polished marble. The perfect blazer, perfect posture, the perfect smile she had spent years perfecting. For the first time, it didn't feel like armor. It felt like something she had been hiding behind. Upstairs, on the 42nd floor, Marcus Hale stood at the window again. The city stretched out beneath him, loud and messy and real. He thought about the long road that had brought him here, the years of being underestimated, nights working double shifts, the quiet decisions that had slowly turned into power. He hadn't come here to punish anyone. He had come to see if power could be used differently. And today, in a small way, it had been. 3 weeks later, the lobby of the Meridian looked almost the same from the outside. Marble still shone. Lilies still sat in tall glass vases. Chandeliers still caught the morning light. Something small had shifted in the air. The kind of shift most people wouldn't elate, unless they had been there before. Chloe Bennett stood behind the reception desk in the same navy blazer. Her posture was different now, less rigid. She no longer made snap decisions the moment someone walked through the glass doors. She had learned the hard way that assumptions could cost more than she was willing to pay. That morning, a young woman in a faded gray hoodie and work boots approached the desk. She looked nervous, clutching a clipboard to her chest. Her name tag read, Maintenance. Electrical. Hi, the woman said quietly. I'm here to check the lighting in the service corridor on the 3rd floor. I was told to sign in here first. Chloe looked at her for a second longer than necessary. Not because she was judging, but because she was making sure she wasn't repeating old habits. What's your name? She asked. Mara, the woman replied. Mara Lewis. I work with the new maintenance contractor Mr. Hale brought in. Chloe nodded and slid the digital tablet across the counter. Sign here, Amara, and if anyone gives you trouble on any floor, you can call this extension directly. She wrote a number on a small card and handed it over. That's my direct line. Not the general desk. Amara blinked, surprised by the gesture. Thank you. Chloe watched her walk toward the service elevator. For a brief moment, she saw herself 3 weeks ago, the version of her that would have already decided this woman didn't belong in the main lobby. She pushed the thought away and went back to her work. Up on the 42nd floor, Marcus Hale stood in what used to be Richard Langford's office. Langford had been reassigned to another property after a long conversation that left no room for negotiation. Marcus hadn't wanted to humiliate the man. He had simply made it clear that the old way of running the building was over. Now the office was simpler. A heavy wooden desk had been replaced with something smaller. The walls were mostly bare, except for one framed photograph. An old picture of Marcus standing outside a run-down apartment building with a toolbox in his hand, taken almost 15 years ago. Knock sounded at the door. Marcus turned. "Come in." Chloe stepped inside, holding a folder. She still looked polished. The sharpness in her eyes had softened into something more careful. "You asked to see me, Mr. Hale," she said. Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit." She sat, back straight, hands folded in her lap. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Marcus leaned back in his chair. "I've been watching how you've been handling things downstairs." Chloe's shoulders tensed slightly. "You've been different," he continued. "More patient, less quick to decide who gets through the door and who doesn't." "I'm trying," she said quietly. "It's not always easy. Old habits don't disappear in 3 weeks." Marcus nodded. "I know. That's why I wanted to talk to you." He opened a drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the desk. Chloe picked it up. It was a new policy document, one she hadn't seen before. "Effective immediately," Marcus said. "Every staff member who works in this building, from the front desk to maintenance to security, will go through the same orientation process I went through when I first started in this industry. They'll spend time on every floor. They'll work a shift in maintenance. They'll understand what it actually takes to keep a place like this standing." Chloe looked up from the paper. "You want me to do that too?" "I want everyone who interacts with people at the entrance to understand who their time actually turning away," Marcus said. "Including you." She was quiet for a long moment. "I used to think this job was about protecting the image of the building," she said finally. "Keeping out anyone who didn't look like they belonged." "And now?" Marcus asked. Chloe met his eyes. "Now I think it's about protecting the people who actually make the building work, even when they don't look like what we expect." Marcus studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Good," he said. "Because starting next week, you're not just the face at the front desk anymore. You're going to help redesign how we train every person who stands in that lobby." Chloe's eyes widened slightly. "You're giving me that responsibility?" "I'm giving you a chance to prove that people can change when they're given the right reason," Marcus said. "Most don't get that chance. Don't waste it." He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. Chloe rose as well. Before she reached the door, she turned back. "Mr. Hale," she said, "why did you really come down that day dressed like that? You could have walked in wearing a suit, and no one would have questioned you." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "Because suits lie," he said simply. "Work boots don't. I needed to know who this building really belonged to. The people behind the desks, or the people who keep the lights on and the water running. Turns out, it was never really about me owning the lease." He picked up his old toolbox from beside the desk, the same one he had carried that first day. "It was about making sure the people who actually build and maintain places like this aren't invisible anymore." Chloe nodded slowly. She didn't have a polished answer this time. She simply said, "Thank you." Marcus watched her leave. When the door closed behind her, he walked to the window and looked down at the city again. The streets were still loud, still messy, still full of people being judged before they ever got a chance to speak. But in this one building, at least, something had started to shift. And for a man who had spent most of his life being underestimated, that small shift was enough to keep going. 6 months later, the front desk at the Meridian no longer felt like a gate. The same marble still gleamed under the lights, but the atmosphere had changed. People who came in wearing work boots or tool belts were greeted with the same professionalism once reserved for residents in tailored suits. The change hadn't happened overnight. It had taken training, uncomfortable conversations, and more than a few mistakes. But it had happened. Chloe Bennett stood at the desk that morning, tablet in hand, when a man in his late 50s walked through the glass doors. He wore a faded work jacket and carried a heavy toolbox. His boots left small marks on the floor. He looked tired. Chloe recognized the look immediately, the same look Marcus had worn the first day. The man approached the desk. "Morning. I'm here for the HVAC inspection on the lower levels. Name's Thomas Reed. New contractor." Chloe smiled. Not the polished, distant smile she used to wear, but something more genuine. "Good morning, Mr. Reed. Welcome to the Meridian. Can I get you to sign in here?" She slid the tablet across. "And if you need anything while you're working, water, access to any floor, or help finding something, just call the front desk. We'll take care of it." Thomas looked at her for a second, clearly not used to this kind of reception. "Appreciate that." As he signed, Chloe noticed the slight hesitation in his movements, the same careful way people moved when they expected to be judged. Before he could walk away, she added, "One more thing. If anyone on any floor gives you a hard time, or makes you feel like you don't belong here, you come straight back to me. Understood?" Thomas studied her face, then gave a small nod. "Understood. Thank you." He headed toward the service elevator. Chloe watched him go, then turned back to her work. From the far end of the lobby, Marcus Hale stood near the elevators, watching the exchange without being noticed. He was dressed the same way he had been 6 months ago. Work boots, simple jacket, toolbox in hand. He had made it a habit to walk through the building like this, at least once a week, not to check on people, to remind himself what the building actually was. He hadn't planned to stay this involved. Something about watching the slow, stubborn shift in culture had kept him coming back. Later that afternoon, Marcus sat in his office on the 42nd floor. The city stretched out beneath the windows, golden in the late light. Chloe knocked and stepped inside when he called her in. She was holding a folder, but she didn't open it right away. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. Marcus gestured to the chair. She sat. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, something that would have been impossible 6 months ago. "I've been thinking about stepping back," Marcus said finally. Chloe looked up, surprised. "From the building?" "From the day-to-day," he clarified. "I never intended to run this place myself. I just needed to see if it could be done differently. You and the team you've been training, you don't need me hovering anymore." Chloe was quiet for a long moment. "You changed more than just the policy," she said. "You changed how people see each other here. That doesn't happen often." Marcus looked out the window. "I didn't do it alone, and I didn't do it perfectly. There were days I wanted to walk away and let someone else deal with it." He turned back to her. "But I kept thinking about something my father used to say when I was young. He worked maintenance in buildings like this his whole life. He told me once, 'Son, people who keep these places standing will never get invited to the meetings upstairs. Without them, there are no meetings.' I never forgot that." Chloe nodded slowly. "What will you do now?" Marcus gave a small smile. "The same thing I've always done. Build things, fix things, stay close enough to remember where I came from, but far enough to let the people who are ready take over." He stood and walked to the window. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the city. "I came here 6 months ago, in work boots, because I wanted to know if power could be used to open work doors instead of close them," he said. "I think I got my answer." Chloe stood as well. She hesitated, then spoke. "Mr. Hale, thank you for not firing me that day, and for giving me the chance to become someone better than the person who stood behind that desk." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, the way he had that first afternoon. "You did the hard part yourself," he said. "I just removed the excuse." He picked up his old toolbox from beside the desk, the same one he had carried the day everything changed. "I'll still come by," he said, "but not as often. This place doesn't need me watching over it anymore." Chloe nodded. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been understood between them. Marcus walked to the door, then paused. "One last thing," he said. "Keep doing what you're doing downstairs. The next person who walks in wearing work boots might be the one who ends up changing everything. Make sure they get the chance." He gave her a final nod, then stepped out. Chloe stood alone in the office for a long time after he left. She walked to the window and looked down at the city, the same view Marcus had looked at so many times. Down below, on the street, she could just make out a figure in work boots crossing the road, toolbox in hand, heading toward whatever came next. She didn't know if it was Marcus or someone else, but for the first time in her life, it didn't matter. She turned away from the window and walked back downstairs to the desk. There was work to do, and this time, she would do it differently.